SpaceX faces significant challenges that could impact the U.S. space program. Its Starship exploded June 18th in Texas, the fourth failure this year for the critical lunar vehicle. This comes amid Elon Musk's departure from the U.S. government, with tensions with President Donald Trump, who threatened to cancel Musk's $22 billion in government contracts. The stakes are high. NASA has awarded SpaceX $4 billion to return astronauts to the moon. Now, for more on the future of SpaceX and the future of the U.S. space program, I'm joined by John Zerella. He's a space journalist and founder of JZ Media. John, always great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks, Elaine.
Well, before we get to those satellite launches we talked about, let's go back to the Starship explosion. What does it do to the timeline of Starship's future missions?
Well, it certainly brings into question a lot of timelines. You know, as you mentioned, Starship has had all these failures back to back to back, and then the explosion of Starship on the test stand. But with every failure, I mean, Elon Musk's MO with SpaceX, all the way back to the early test flights of the Falcon rocket, where you test it, it explodes, you test it again, you test it again, you keep testing it until you get it right. And that's pretty much what he's doing here with Starship. So every test brings information in that can help you with the next one. But clearly, there are timelines that are critical. As you mentioned, with NASA, wants to get astronauts on the moon by 2027. They need a Starship lander to do that. They've paid Elon Musk and SpaceX the $4 billion that you mentioned for this modified Starship to land on the moon with astronauts. 2027 does not seem realistic at this point.
You mentioned that it's all about testing for Elon Musk. So other than that, is there anything else SpaceX is doing to address these reoccurring technical failures this year? And really, how are his investors and commercial partners responding to it?
Well, you know, so far, the commercial partners, and certainly with Falcon 9, they're fine. I mean, that vehicle is tried and true and is, you know, in fact, there's a statistic that says 83% of all of the launches worldwide are provided by SpaceX Falcon 9 rockets, basically. As far as Starship goes, pretty much privately funded, except for the NASA portion of the modified lander that they're hoping to get sooner rather than later, but doesn't look good at this point. So investors seem to be okay right now because he's got a good track record. Sometimes he overpromises, doesn't deliver on time, but at the end of the day, he does deliver, as he's done with this Falcon 9. And Starship is incredibly innovative technology. So, you know, along the way, you expect these failures.
Right, you've covered some of those launches yourself. I know that you've covered NASA for many, many years. You've said it, Elon Musk isn't a stranger to failure, but how has that changed now that he's really focusing in on his companies again? He took that sort of hiatus away to be in Washington, D.C. a lot, but any sense that you're getting of how he's sort of reinvigorating his companies just by being there?
Yeah, no doubt about it, Elaine. I think that's clear. And he's at the helm, and he was always, you could always see him at Starbase in Texas. He'd be in launch control there. He was part and parcel of the fabric of those launches. So now that he's back, there's no doubt that it's reinvigorated the company. The question remains, though, can they get these issues resolved and have a successful, which they haven't had yet, end-to-end test of Starship from launch to getting into orbit to re-entering the atmosphere and then landing. Now, the landing at this point would be in the Pacific Ocean with Starship, but that's the key. And, you know, again, you know, NASA is counting on him because without him, and without them delivering that modified Starship, they're not going to the moon in 2027 with a landing.
Well, John, does NASA really have any other options other than Elon Musk and SpaceX?
They do, in fact. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, another billionaire, he has been developing, with a NASA contract, a vehicle called Blue Moon, which will be an alternative to SpaceX's Starship. But Blue Moon was not supposed to come online until later in the Artemis series of moon landings. So whether they could make a switch, whether they could get Blue Moon ready in time for a landing, probably not 2027 either. But there is an alternative if, for whatever reason, Starship just doesn't get off the ground successfully.
Yeah, and have those incidents by SpaceX shaken public or government confidence in private space flight programs? You just mentioned Blue Origin, but what does that do to overall confidence in these programs?
I don't think there's any shaken confidence yet. I think, in Washington, members of Congress who do hold the purse strings may start to look a little cross-eyed if Musk can't get these issues resolved, and they may worry about what's the future. Now, remember one thing, it's clear. NASA's not in any great shakes right now. Their budget's being cut dramatically. Jared Isaacman, another billionaire, was supposed to take over the reins as NASA administrator. That ended. Trump took his nomination off the table. So NASA's still looking for a new administrator. They don't have that yet. So, there are a lot of issues within NASA right now, not just with, its SpaceX relationship, but the contracts it has with SpaceX. A lot of their contracts are tied to SpaceX. The question will be if Congress gets worried, and the wild card in all of this is, where does China stand? Is China going to press to get to the moon 2030, before 2030? And if NASA keeps experiencing these failures with SpaceX's Starship, what happens? That's an interesting question. What will, the United States do if all of a sudden China appears to be taking a lead in what is clearly a race to get back to the moon?
John Zerella, always great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Certainly.